Graham Vincent Violinmaker. I do believe I'm live. Things keep popping up on the screen, so you're never sure. Right, okay, unannounced, I'm afraid. I probably won't make this too long this week. It's been a busy week. Not that many questions in, but some very good ones. So let's crack straight in with, I've got this on various screens around me, so I'll be looking all over the place. First one from Robin. Do you use or have you used a casein based sealer, and do you have a good casein sealer recipe? I've managed to obtain casein and slaked lime in good quantity at a fair price. Just not sure of the recipe. I haven't. I'm probably the wrong person to be asking that. Some people absolutely swear by a sort of a casein based sealers, for ground and what have you. Not me. It's not that I've got anything against it. It's just basically there are many different ways of doing these things, and it's not one that I've tried. So yeah, not much help there, I'm afraid. However, Robin, I would be absolutely fascinated to hear how this progresses, because obviously it's something I know absolutely nothing about, and I'm always keen to learn more, as you know. So yeah, sorry I can't really be much more helpful about that. I was having a discussion with a chap called Aaron about bench heights. This is quite interesting. I'm 5'9", and he's just in the process of sort of making himself a couple of benches, and he was asking me, what sort of bench height I have, and I have 3 kind of benches in the workshop that I use. The first one, do you know what? I'm going to work in predominantly in inches, simply because when I'm in the workshop, they're easier to read at arm's length. So for things like, it's funny, for things that aren't absolutely exact, I tend to use inches, and then when I get down to the measurements of the finer points of violins, I tend to switch to millimeters. So it's a little bit of a weird mixture, but there we go. Where are we? So I have got one is at 37 inches, that is to say, what's that, 940 millimeters, and that's quite tall. It's quite a tall bench, and as I said to him, if that was the only bench I had, I would have to have it slightly shorter, but it's really fantastic for some types of work, but it's just a little bit high. It's too high for me to sort of put some of my machines onto and use. So I have a second bench which is about an inch lower, which I find very useful for some things. And then I have a third bench, which is the one I tend to have my machine bits and pieces on, which is 34 inches. 34 inches translates to 865 millimeters roughly. And with those 3, I'm pretty happy. Like I say, I'm generally used 37. If I only had to have one bench, it would have to be very slightly lower, because there's some things I can't do on that bench. Hope that makes sense. Right, more questions. So, question from Brendan. This was really interesting. Greetings, Graham. I have come by some old pipe organ flutes made of spruce that I wanted to repurpose into violin tops, but the material I have is not thick enough to resaw into a book-matched pair, and it's not wide enough for a single piece. So I wanted to ask about joining 2 pieces of wood that don't exactly come from the same part of the tree. Basically, one half of the top will come from approximately 16 inches above or below the other half. Does it matter that that much to not have complementary grain structures in both halves? Well, not at all. I think I mean, if it's acceptable to have one piece front, then I mean, the 2 halves of that are not the same. Yeah, they're similar, but it's not the same. A book matched one is basically, you have a piece of timber, you cut it, split it, open it up, so you've got very similar grain. But if you have a piece of wood, this is starting as one piece of wood, and you take a piece from there and move it to there, then they are going to be every bit as similar as the book matched, I would have said. And there are certainly some very, very well-known violins, including a Stradivarius or two, which have exactly the situation you're describing, where they've got mismatched fronts, so to speak. I think I'm probably wrong. I think it's the Lady Blunt Strad, but I wish I'd looked this up beforehand, which actually has a front made, it appears, from two different trees. But anyway, so no, I personally, and all of this is, you know, personal opinion, I think it's absolutely fine. Obviously, visually, you don't really want, you know, one piece to sort of be one color and then another one to be a completely different color, but you're describing a situation where it's exactly the same piece of wood, but rather than being book matched, it's just simply brought from there to there. I do not have a problem with that at all. So, right, let's have a quick look at some of the questions that were put on the Q&A last time. Yeah, Jeff 034 made an excellent point, because I was talking about, I see there's a question in from Barry, which I will deal with in a moment. So Jeff made an excellent point, that you can just buy varnishes off the shelf, because I've been talking about my own handmade oil varnish and saying how dangerous it is and all the rest of it, and it is a real palaver. There's just something in my nature that I just like to do as much as possible, and I do like the idea of effectively being able to use stuff I can just buy at the local shop, so to speak, and turn it into a musical instrument. I know I can't buy resin at the local shop, but you understand the point. So, but I have used. I mean, he mentions Hamel in Germany, and I think it was on my number 1 and number 2 violins. I used exactly that, and he's using a spirit varnish. I actually used their oil varnish, so I can't vouch for the spirit varnish, but the oil one was fine. The colours were a little bit artificial, but that was great. Gary M. Eden. Gary was the chap who basically raised the question about whether Stradivarius may have introduced some sort of compensation between the sides of the violin with the actual bridge, because it's been observed, apparently, although I haven't really got this information myself, that one side, the F-hole, is slightly lower, and he was suggesting it may well be because the bridge could have been angled in compensation. And he's I mean, I basically sort of said, you know, in my opinion, I didn't think that was very likely, because we're talking about an instrument without frets, where, you know, you're constantly sort of microscopically adjusting the position of your finger to change the pitch, and I thought that was more important than, you know, a compensation. But he's come back with some, you know, with some logical and reasoned comments about that. There on the last Q&A, the Q&A, it's number 137, Q&A number 11. You go and have a look at that if you're interested in seeing what he has to say. But in all honesty, Gary, I'm still not persuaded. If you have more argument, let me know, because I would, you know, I'm not saying that I'm right, but I'm just not persuaded yet. Now, a question came in from Barry, didn't it? Graham, have you ever come across violin makers that use either semi-precious stones internally for resonance and or exotic wood for soundposts, especially stone, metal, silver, copper? I'm racking my brains here, trying to think. Semi-precious stones internally for resonance, because no, I mean we did talk about resonant strings, I think, in either the last Q&A or the one before, and so I assume this is a continuation of that. I haven't. I have not heard of any violin makers using the semi-precious stones internally for resonance. Exotic wood for soundposts is, I think, a completely different matter. You see all sorts of things being used for soundposts, and I think some of them are just a matter of what was to hand, and others are driven by sort of people's experimentation and notions. So, I mean, there are generally the soundpost is going to be made from spruce, probably, or a softwood. The sort of pretty much always it's the same softwood, the same spruce as the front. So you have this post, which is generally about 6mm diameter, or maybe slightly less, and it's generally just the post with a slight angle top and bottom so that it fits within the arching. Easy enough. Then you have some people who have done things like put a piece of cork on one end. I actually tried this. I put a piece of cork on both ends because I thought it would be interesting. I don't do it anymore. I've seen and I've heard of people actually drilling holes in the soundpost so that you have the same sort of footprint, so to speak. So there isn't a greater point loading on the front of the back, but actually, obviously, it reduces the density of the soundpost considerably. There's certainly an argument for that. Not something I've done. You see people who've just grabbed whatever's available, and so I have heard of people finding, pencils being used as soundposts. Pernambuco turns up on a fairly regular basis simply because I think people just happen to have an old bow on the bench that's sort of about the right diameter and just chopped a section of that off. I can see, I mean, it depends what you think the purpose of the soundpost is. Do you think it's only there to create a sort of a pivot around which the front moves, or do you think it's also there to help transmit sound to the back? If you think its main purpose is simply to allow rotation of the front, so to speak, on a fixed point, then obviously it wouldn't matter what it was made of. If it's also serving the purpose of vibrating and moving sound through to the back, moving vibrations to the back, transmitting them to the back, then obviously the weight of that will act as a filter, and it will tend to knock out some of the higher frequencies. Not many high frequencies make it through to the back anyway, which I'm jumping around subjects so much here, I do apologise. One of the things that you can do when you're recording a violin is actually record it from the back, because you get a much mellower sound. You don't get all the harsh treble. So that's what's going on in that situation. So Barry, the answer to your question is I haven't tried any exotic stone, whatever, soundposts. It's certainly something that I'm intrigued by. I'm not really up to speed on what these adjustable carbon fiber sort of soundposts sound like. So who knows? And you just sent another comment through. Just a thought, experimental, but a soundpost like a bobbin turned with either end larger. I'm thinking vibration and sound transformation. Yeah, I mean, there's so much to play with. That's an interesting idea, and yeah, who knows? Certainly, some of the carbon fiber ones that you see have a floating sort of adjustable, end on it that just seats to fit the actual sort of arching of the front and the back. Okay, that's a really interesting one. Thank you for that. Let's have a quick look at any outstanding questions from last week. Andrew Parrish, ever fancied a go at a cello? Yes, I have. I did actually kind of think about it. I looked into it, and the first thing I came across was the price of really nice figured wood of a size that's suitable for a cello. It was horrendously expensive, and it kind of put me off just having a go just for the hell of it. It's something I might have a go at one day, but there's still so much that I need to learn about violins and violin making that I think maybe I'd be better served to concentrate. I think one of the things that I am thinking about, talking about trying things that are slightly different, I keep promising people I'm going to make a viola at some stage. I must do that. And also, I'm really quite keen to have a go at a 5-string. I'm on the thing at the moment. I'm quite keen to have a go at 5-string violin at some stage. So yeah, that's on the list of things to do, certainly. Monty Latham. I took my plans to UPS and had them copied and cut those out for templates. That's a very simple way. This we were talking about how to actually sort of transfer your plans onto actual templates. Go to UPS and get them photocopied. As long as you make sure they do a proper one-to-one copy, because that's a really nasty potential area to introduce error. Fireman 9143, if Stradivarius had electricity in a router, he would have used them too. I'm sure he absolutely would have done. He would have done. The mark of a master craftsman isn't little nicks and imperfections, it's clean finished products. I've heard silversmiths make comments that they can produce perfectly smooth spoons, but nowadays people think it has to have little dimples and imperfections to be handmade. It's a sign of how far we are removed from the means of production. Yeah, that's an interesting one, isn't it? The bottom line is most businesses where you're making something and people are buying them are in some peculiar little way fashion businesses, fashion industries. And although violins don't change that much, there are very definite, trends and fashions that do affect things. And I personally, my feeling is that as more and more stuff is produced perfectly by CNC and by wonderful systems in factories and so on, that people do like to see not imperfections and nicks, but they like to see variation, and they like to see the mark of someone's hand having, they like to know and see that the shape of something, the way it's made, was driven by individual thought applied to that individual violin and so on. And yeah, you could say just a load of dents and marks are kind of a crass way of showing that. And I understand where you're coming from. I do tend to leave some rough edges on what I do, because I like to work quickly, and I think I'm probably one of the people you're describing. For me, I do quite like to let it be seen that it was made by a human. So it again, it's fashion, isn't it? And it's luckily for you and I, there are different people buying, and some people will go for the perfect finish, and some people will go for the one that shows that there was a human behind it. So right, question from Barry. Okay, that's the same question I've answered about soundposts, so thanks, Barry. Monty Latham said, have you seen the video of the guy who uses a laser level as an arching gauge? If so, what do you think of it? I haven't seen that particular one, but it's I can see that would be a really useful technique, and basically just project the ability to project accurate lines onto curved surfaces, and then actually see what's going on. Yeah, it could be really useful. I have certainly seen photographs of an Amati violin where someone was projecting a laser line onto it, and it was really useful. It really showed up the arching beautifully. Anderson Instruments. Okay, now this is an interesting one. This is one I'm looking forward to talking about. Last week I kind of alluded to the fact that a lot of old paintings show bridges in positions that we don't recognize on violins now. There are so many paintings where the bridge is back here, and this is in a painting, or paintings where in all other respects, the rendition, the rendering of the violin is fantastic. The strings, everything is great. The detail on the bridge is amazing. And then it's in a completely different place. And a lot of people will say, oh, they just got it wrong in the painting. And if it was only one, then you might say, yeah, fair enough. But you see it so often that I don't think you can just discount it and say it was a mistake in the painting. I think actually it's useful information which you need to, be open to considering. Okay, WM Crash. You mentioned your backs are usually 12mm, but can be less. So that 12mm refers to the thickness of the blank before I start. When you have a smaller thickness like the 8mm you mentioned, did you adjust the rib to compensate? I was reading somewhere that there's a magical fixed measurement, not sure by whom it was fixed, for the overall thickness of a violin body, so flatter plates would need compensation for wider ribs. I did wonder about it, but it's not something I did. I generally, I normally work with a parallel rib garland. I'm not one of these people who tapers it or has it with a spring in it. And that particular one with the very shallow front and back, I kept at 30mm. And I can vouch for the fact that that turned out to be a really fabulous violin. Johnny, WW9KS. Hi, how would you build the body of a Yekin? Basically a circle with a 5mm rebate on the inside. Assuming you don't have an industrial finger joint and lathe like in this video. And he's attached a video. It's an hour-long video of of a Chinese factory production of a what's it called, a moon harp or something like that. All I can say basically is I would like to concentrate on violins. I think that's where my skill is. There's so much more I need to learn about that. I think you do better probably to have a look at some banjo makers, because they have to put together sort of rim structures like that. But I really I do these videos for the fun of it, and free, and they do impinge on my working time a little bit, but I'm okay with that. But I haven't really got time to watch an hour-long video about something that I probably won't be doing. Go and see what the banjo makers are up to, and actually ask a banjo maker. That would be my best advice, because I'm sure they will have something useful to add, whereas I'm kind of looking at it and thinking it's interesting, but it's way outside of anything I do for violins. That's not very helpful, is it? I do apologise. I think I am pretty much there. So let me just have a quick look, see if anyone's added anything. Oh, yeah, there's Barry. I received this morning Tonewood in Bubinga, Whiskey Oak Paduk. Your podcast made me curious to experiment. As an artist painter, I push my work with accidents and or experiments. Yeah, you got two choices really when you're making violins. You can either be happy making exact wonderful copies of wonderful instruments, or you can be the sort where there's a little voice in your ear saying, why don't you try that instead? And I'm afraid I'm one of those, and it sounds like, Barry, you may be as well. Anyway, I'm going to call it a day there. I hope there's been something in here that's been of interest to you. Like, subscribe, join me on Patreon, all that sort of stuff. Look after yourselves. Cheers, folks. Bye.